the things that Dwayne in the front row here likes to tease me about is my we gotta list. So wherever we're pulling out of the driveway and I am having a moment to survey the house as we're leaving, all of a sudden through my mind will go all of these things that we gotta do. We gotta this, we gotta that, we gotta remember this, we gotta get to that. How many of you have an we gotta list? Really, it's a he gotta list, if I was being totally honest, right? And that's on a small scale. I think that we all have, running from I gottas, little things we think we need to adjust and change in the circumstances of our lives, all the way to I wannas, big things that we want to change or adjust somehow in our lives. And before we get into the nuts and bolts of tonight's topic, I'd like you to take one moment, without being too enlightened about it, to think about one of your I wannas. I want to change my life in this way. I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to find the one. I want to get a bigger house, whatever it might be. So take one moment to think about that and then confide in the person next to you about what that is. We're going to do an exercise around this later. So I would be shocked and surprised if you couldn't come up with a whole bunch of I gottas and I wannas, really, honestly, if you were to be, look inside of yourself. Because we have such a weird way of looking at life in this culture. We think of it as some kind of game that we have to win. Right? And it actually, the very mindset of I gotta, I wanna, is what prevents us from having the things that we want in our lives. It doesn't actually get us the things, it prevents us from having the experience that we want. In the spring of 2008, I was running half marathons, and I had decided that I wanted to run a half marathon and beat my best ever time, which was 2 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds. Imagine getting in at 2 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds. If you are a runner, how many of you run in this audience? Do you have any idea how frustrating that is? Because if I got in at 1:59, I could say I did it in under 2 hours. So I decided this was going to be my goal, and I trained for this thing, and I prepared for this thing, and the night before the half marathon was to take place, I started feeling a little tickle in the back of my throat. But I am going to get in under 2 hours. I did this with a group of people. One was a really good friend of mine whose name was Laura. So we start out, it rained all night long that night, but as soon as we got to the starting line, the sun came out and it was beautiful, and I took this as a cosmic sign, and I abandoned my jacket at the starting line, and then off we go, and the clouds come back, and it starts to rain, and it starts to pour, and it is soaking wet. This is a picture from the actual race. So about an hour in, I am now cold and wet, but I am determined that I am going to get in under 2 hours. I have got my head down. I am driven. I am going to do it. I know what my goal is. I am going to do it. But I can feel how cold I'm getting and how miserable I'm getting, and then it starts to hail. There are big chunks of ice coming down out of the sky. Hail, not small hail either, big hail. So now I am soaking wet and there is ice coming down on top of me. But no, I am still determined. And eventually, as it gets closer and closer to 2 hours, and I am nowhere near the finish line, I realize it is not going to happen. So I crossed the finish line in a state of misery. I clawed across, feeling horrible. And my friend is coming in behind me. A good 15, 20 minutes later, she comes in behind me. Here she is. She comes across the finish line like this. She ran through the hail. She ran through the rain. She had exactly the same life circumstances as I did. And she had a completely, totally different experience. And that, to me, I think is so important to realize. I mean, the metaphor of that, I think, is perfect. Because we would all like to be able to have that experience, even though we're running through our metaphorical hail and rain and all the difficult circumstances of our lives, right? The question is, how do we do that? So, ultimately, it requires the ability to fall in love with our life experience in its entirety, instead of only looking for these little moments that we're measuring as being the value and the worth of our lives, right? The happy moments, the good moments. We have to be able to fall in love with our own life experience totally across the board. And the irony in all of this is, like, if you think about your number one I wanted that you just came up with, how do you imagine you would feel if you got that thing? How do you imagine? Great, right? You imagine you're going to feel fabulous. So if you say to yourself, I just would like to have Halle Berry's body. Either I would like to have it be mine, or I want to have it sleeping next to me, right? One or the other. There she is. Now, in all honesty, I don't think she really has Halle Berry's body either in that picture. But, if such a thing were to occur, right? And you actually get it from the perspective of your body right here, right now, looking at that, how do you feel? Honestly, don't you end up feeling not so great? Because you are looking out through the lenses of what you don't have, right? And you end up feeling crappy. And we don't tune into this, but this is how it works. You can't feel anything but bad when you're looking at your life through what you believe isn't there, through these kind of lenses of lack. And we are cuckoo in this culture. We buy into the promise that if we had all of this stuff, right, that car, that house, if we had all of this stuff, we say, oh, I would feel so much better if I had that. We think we need this perfect picture in order to be okay. But that quest for perfecting means that we also have to perform. And this performing, perfecting thing that we start getting driven by creates a whole lot of misery. And it's insidious. We don't realize how much we start to attach our happiness to things or to having our circumstances be different somehow than what they actually are. And this, particularly in terms of materialistic stuff, we are the wealthiest culture ever to exist in the history of humankind. We are the most abundant, we are the most privileged, we have the most healthcare, we have the most education, we have all of this stuff. And we are also the most in debt, the most obese, the most over-medicated, the most addicted, and the most depressed. We have the highest suicide rates. In the richest countries have the highest suicide rates. Like this is not happiness. Certainly a certain degree of material abundance is necessary for our survival, but there's something else going on that we need to address in order to actually live happy, fulfilled lives. myself, if by some miracle occurred and I actually got all my I gottas and I wannas, right? Poof, there they are. My head would go to what if? Okay, it's all fine now, but what if there's an earthquake and the dam breaks, then the river comes flooding down and wipes out my whole house? What if? I know myself well enough. What if absolutely nothing in your life changed? What would you have to shift from within to attain a state of happiness, even if everything outside of you stayed exactly